I kind of continued on and worked with teachers and gave workshops, and especially listened to teachers' questions about teaching writing, I realized that one of the biggest questions that they seemed to come to me with after workshops was, yes, it's so great. You've got this writing power book, and then you've done the nonfiction writing power book, but I'm looking at a year in my classroom from September to June, and I don't know how to manage fitting it all in. I mean, that's always the question teachers ask. It's, how do I manage to fit it all in? So when I realized that, I started thinking, well, maybe rather than doing a second edition of just writing power, I could look at how do you fit all the types of writing that you need to teach in a year into a year. And I started thinking, okay, well, what are the main forms of writing that teachers need to focus on within a school year? And there's really four basic ones. There's personal narrative, the nonfiction, which is a big umbrella, and then story writing, and then poetry. So within a year, a teacher needs to focus on all of those things. So when I started thinking about that, it really started getting me connected to brain pockets. And brain pockets is how I've spent a long time talking to kids about where do writers get their ideas for writing. So personal narrative comes from our memory pocket. Information writing comes from our fact pocket. And then story writing comes from our imagination pocket. And poetry kind of fits in all three. So when I was thinking about, okay, how am I going to best help teachers teach writing? How do I fit it all in? It kind of fit nicely into that kind of visual of writing ideas. When I think back when I was a beginning teacher, like I had no idea what I was doing. And especially when it came to teaching writing, and I think what I ended up doing is just grabbing at whatever idea I saw. And basically, you could fill an entire year of just grabbing isolated, cool lessons. And I mean, I didn't have Pinterest way back then, but Pinterest is dangerous because you can just grab at those shiny lessons that you see, and yeah, great, your writing lesson's done, you've got this great thing. But really, when it comes down to it, what is our job? Our job is to help our kids become better writers, not just grab at shiny objects, we call them, and have them produce these pieces of isolated writing. And so I think that was one of the really important things for me in writing this book, and trying to get teachers to recognize that, teaching writing is hard. It just is hard to do. And unless you kind of have that structure and that organization and that direction of where you want to go, as I said, you could fill your entire school year with Pinterest and be fine, but your kids aren't going to be really learning how to be better writers, which I think is what our goal is. As writers, and I always refer to children as writers, we have lots of ideas that we can share with our reader. But one of the important things is to think about what it is that I really want to write today, and what it is that I want to share with my audience or my reader. So the connection with the three brain pockets is really all about writers' ideas. But when we're writing in our memory pocket, we're not necessarily going into the other pockets. They're linked, but the way I teach them, we're sort of in one for a certain period of time. Sometimes we think about nonfiction writing as this big umbrella of one thing, but nonfiction writing is many, many things, and it depends on what information you want to share. So one of the things I do when I talk to students about nonfiction writing, yes, nonfiction writing is sharing information, but what kind of information are we sharing? If we're describing something, then it's descriptive writing. If we want to persuade someone, it's persuasive. So there's the different forms of nonfiction within that broad umbrella of nonfiction writing. It can actually be broken down into the specific text structures of the different forms of writing. And it also, as I said, it depends on the purpose, like what it is you want to share. Kind of purposeful and mindful writing as well. It's not just writing. I mean, it's often kids will say, I hear this all the time, is this for marks? How long does this have to be? And so they're losing their sense of purpose, and they're losing their sense of wanting to write because they're excited about it. So I like to kind of incorporate that as well. And that's one of the reasons I think too, where I value so much using the anchor books or the mentor texts when I'm teaching writing, because I'll often use the book and say, what did this writer do to hook the reader at the beginning, or what technique was the writer using here to describe this scene. So it's that metacognitive piece about, really being aware of the craft of writing sort of from the inside out. I do quite a lot of work in the Okanagan in Kelowna School District 23, and I'm working with novice teachers there, and I have for a few years. And I think over the years of working with them, I've been really trying to be mindful of what are they going to need in their first few years of teaching that I never had. And I often tied my writing lessons with things that were going on, like seasons. Like I think you do your Thanksgiving, what am I thankful for, glue it on a turkey, and then you write a haunted house story, and then you write about peace on Remembrance Day. I mean, there were these kind of standard writing lessons that I would do because I didn't know how. No one taught me how to teach writing. And so I think the experience of working with new teachers and thinking, like, what would I as a new teacher really value here? And looking at not just, the mini lessons, but overall, what is an effective writing program? And one of the things that I have teachers think about, and this isn't just new teachers, it's seasoned teachers too, like, if a parent walked into your classroom and said, you know what, my child has never really liked writing, I really want them to become better at writing and enjoy it better, can you tell me a little bit about your writing program? Mm-hmm. How would you answer that question? Mm-hmm. And if you're stumbling over your words trying to say, well, we just wrote about, Thanksgiving, if you're stumbling to answer that question, which I would have been, even 15 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to answer that. What am I going to do to help teachers be able to be really clear about what effective writing looks like in a classroom, and what are the little things that we are doing in a day or a week or a month or in our whole year to really ensure that when my students walk out in June, I've done everything I can to help them become better at writing, and also to love writing. I mean, that's the other key. It's got to be a joyful experience. I know I've talked about, beginning teachers, but it's everyone, right? We all have things that we're really good at and we're really confident at. And, I would say science and math are probably the ones that I have the least amount of comfort. It's not my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But there's some who find that about writing. So I was just always looking, as I was writing this book, I was thinking, what's going to be the most useful and helpful for teachers? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that I think really helps, it certainly helped me, and when I work with teachers, it seems to help them, is having a writing routine, and having a routine whereby you know what you're doing on Monday and Tuesday, and also the students know. Because if you're looking at your timetable and you're thinking, oh no, I have writing today, what am I going to do? Then there's that feeling of scrambling, and then that can, I think, lend itself more to those isolated lessons. So plan, draft, revise every week. Mondays planning, Tuesdays drafting, Thursdays revising. And once the children start becoming really comfortable with that, I find it so much easier for me to sort of teach all the other mini lessons, because they're in this routine and they're comfortable with it, and they know the pressure's off. They know it's not going to be published. It's not going to be up, and they don't have to do a good copy. I hated that when I was a student, and now we're going to do a good copy. And it just felt like you were doing, like, how many good copies from the of the same thing do we have to do? And then it took all the joy out. The thing is, with practice rights, if you haven't felt like it was a good one, you don't have to worry about it, because even if you didn't even finish it, because next week you're doing it again. So I feel like that, what I've seen with students, having that routine of we're just practicing. But I also use the analogy of, you don't get better at anything unless you practice. It's once every few months, they choose their favorite practice right, and we publish it. And then that becomes, something that they can put up on the bulletin board or publish and take home. But having it always be about the good copy or the product, I think it is not helping them, feel like they're getting better. To me, establishing an effective writing program, the assessment that we're doing to really establish, it's not really benchmarking, but it's just at the beginning of the school year, how really important it is to have your kids do a sample writing, not a cold write. The first day of school, everyone gets a piece of paper and has to write, like, from nothing. But, around the middle of October, just having the students do a piece of writing that you use to evaluate where they're sitting. If you are basing your lessons, the lessons that you're teaching your children, um, on random ideas, and you're not really looking at the kids themselves, we're not being effective teachers. So basically, the students help me know what the trends are. Like, so if I take those samples of writing that the students do, and I really look at them and I ask myself, what are the strengths of this class? And what are the gaps? I talk to teachers a lot about, getting that initial writing sample and then using it to help guide your practice. But then the ongoing assessment comes when you're having conferencing with children, writing conferences, and that's the one-to-one individual conferences where you can look at a child's writing and see where they're sitting in terms of their own personal goals. So to me, the the class sample helps determine what lessons I'm going to teach everyone, but the conferencing assessment helps me to individualize the goals a little bit for the students. Now what I do is, rather than taking a class set of writing home, I take a student's writing folder home. So I'm reading through 4 or 5 practice writes, all by the same child. And what that does for me is it helps me notice a pattern. Because if you're reading one piece of writing by one child and then you're doing that 26 times, you're not really noticing anything. But if you're taking a child's writing folder and you're looking at 4 or 5 pieces by the same student, it becomes really obvious what they need to work on. And when I take the writing folder home, I might take 4 folders home a week. I look through 4 students, writing. Then those are the 4 students I'll conference with the next week, because it's really fresh in my mind. I know exactly what I'm going to say to them, what I noticed in their writing, and then we set a goal for moving forward. Those are my 2 sort of go-to assessment practices. One is the school-wide one, the class writing sample at the beginning of the year, and then the other is that kind of ongoing assessment. And it's just that really small shift between assessing writing, a piece of writing, and then assessing the writer as the child as a whole. And you get a much better picture of a child as a writer when you're looking at several pieces of writing at the same time. I'm really excited about this book because I feel like I would have loved to have had it when I graduated, and it's like, okay, here's your year. Here's your everything you need to have in 1 year. Teaching writing, all the mini lessons are there. Anchor books are listed. It's like when I write, I'm always writing. Is to talk about purpose. I'm always writing, thinking, what would I want to have as a, what tips would I need and what lessons are most effective. And so it's exciting for me to, and I wouldn't have been able to ever write this book as a beginning teacher because everything I put in is all based on, experience, and you learn all the time. I'm constantly learning because I'm still teaching and because I'm still working with kids. And so it's been a joyful experience to put all that I've learned myself teaching writing and then giving that back to teachers. So it's great to be able to do that.